In this episode, we are going to learn how to check for collisions between a sprite and a sprite list. In the previous episode, we learned how to check for collisions between a sprite and a sprite. So that's the difference. Now we are going to learn how to check for collisions between sprite and a sprite list. So the end result will look something like this. We will have 4 ships and the greeny character, and the greeny character will be able to collide with these sprites. And the greeny is a sprite list itself, so a separate sprite list, and these ships are also sprite lists, but these are in the same sprite list group. So if greeny touches either of these ships, the ship will be colored to red and it will display the collision text. And when the greeny is not touching the ship, its color will go back to its default. And also it works with all these ships. So I have already prepared this scene. We have one sprite list, which is the player list. Here I'm loading the greeny sprite, setting its position and adding greeny to this player list. Here I'm creating these directions, dictionary, left, right, up, down, false, player speed, which is 500, player X and player Y position, and added also the on key press event and checking if symbol is left, setting the directions at left to true, and this applies to right, up and down. When the key is released, I'm just setting back the directions to false everywhere. And in the on draw, I'm just drawing the player list, and we have the on update, and it checks if the directions at left is true, it just moves the character to left, and if right is true, it moves the character to right and up and down and so on. And here I'm just setting the player's position to player X and player Y. So what we have now is just the greeny character moving inside the window. So now let's add the ships. Okay, first let's create a separate sprite list for the ships. So I'm going to call it ship list, and this will be also arcade sprite list, and all the ships will be appended to this list. So let's do the first ship, which will be the ship 1 from assets, images and playership.png, and I'm just going to create also a sprite from it and set its position and also append this ship 1 to the ship list. And let's do this for the next ship, and for the next ship I'm going to use a built-in resource. So ship 2 equals resources, images, space shooter, player ship 1 blue.png, and you can find this player ship in the arcade documentation in the built-in resources section. Also creating a sprite from it, setting its position and appending this to the ship list. And let's do this for the remaining 2 ships. So this will be the ship 3, also from the built-in resources, and the player ship 2 orange.png, and the ship 4 will be player ship 3 orange.png, also from the resources. And now that we created these ships and sprites and added them to the ship list, let's draw this ship list in the onDraw method using the ship list.draw. So let me run it. Okay, so these will be the ships which greeny will collide with. So for the collision detection, just go to the onUpdate method, and we are going to use the following function, which is the arcade that check for collision with list. And this takes 2 parameters or 2 arguments. One is the self.player, which is the sprite, and the self.shiplist, which is the sprite list. And this will return, if I hover over with the mouse, this will return a list of sprite type if there is a collision. If there is no collision, it will return an empty list. And you can see also the parameters. The first parameter is the sprite type, which is in our case the self.player, and the second parameter is the sprite list, which is the ship list. And now let's check if we have a hit. So if this hit is not an empty list, then we are going to print out the hit. So let me run it, and as soon as greeny collides, for example, with this ship, it will print out this. So as you can see, this is a list, and it contains a sprite, so the sprite which Greenie collided with. And the next thing I'm just going to do is save this sprite into a property. So here I'm just going to scroll up and here create one more property, which will be the self.collides-with-sprite. And this will be either an arcade sprite or none, and by default its value will be set to none. And here when we have a hit, I'm just going to set this property equal to, so self.collides-with-sprite equal to hit at index 0. And this will save that sprite into this. And also I'm just going to set the sprite's color, so self.collides-with-sprite.color, this is how we can set the sprite's color, to self.hitbox collision color. And I have also created this one. So let's scroll up and let's create this hitbox collision color. So I'm going to create two of these colors. One will be the hitbox base color when there is no collision, so this will be set to white. And one will be the hitbox collision color, so this will be set to red. And I'm just going to add one more property, which is the colliding. So self.colliding equals false. And now let's scroll down to the onUpdate. And here we are going to set the color to hitbox collision color, which is the red. And also we are going to set the self.colliding, we just created this property, to true. And now let's do something also if there is no hit, so else. And in the else clause, I'm just going to create one more if condition. So if the self.collides-with-sprite is not none, so we have here saved a sprite to this property. So in this case we are going to set back to the base color its color value. So self.collides-with-sprite.color will be equal to hitbox base color, which is the white. And also set back this property to none. So self.collides-with-sprite equals to none. And also just set the self.colliding back to false. So here we are setting it to true, and here we are setting it back to false if there is no hit. Okay, now we should also draw these in the onDraw method. So here I'm just going to ask if the self.colliding is true. I'm going to draw the player's hitbox using the player list.draw hitboxes, and also with this box collision color, which is the red. And also I'm just going to display a text, so arcade.draw text, collision in XY position 640 and 650, red, and font size will be 24. And remember, these methods are very slow, so only use these methods for debugging, also the draw hitboxes and also the draw text method. And else, if collision is false, we are going to draw the hitbox for the player, so player list.draw hitbox with the hitbox base color, which is the white. So let me see it. Okay, now let's collide with this ship. And as you can see, now it colors the ship to red, and also the hitbox for Greenie is also red, and also it displays this text collision. And lastly, just also draw the hitboxes for the spaceships. So here, after this if condition in the onDraw method, I'm just going to call this function, so self.shiplist the draw hitboxes, and this will draw the hitboxes or the collision boxes for all the ships with this base color. So as you can see, it now draws the hitboxes for all the ships. So this is how we can check for collisions between a sprite and a sprite list in Arcade. And I'm just going to show you quickly one more way. So in the last episode we used this arcade.check for collisions, and it takes two sprites, and if you hover over with the mouse you can see that it returns bool. So if there is a collision it returns true, if there is no collision it returns false. And in this episode we use the arcade.check for collision with list, and this returns an empty list if there is no collision, or it returns a list with the sprite. And there is one more, I'm just going to call it hit2, and this is the arcade.check for collision with lists, so lists in plural. And this takes also a sprite, so in this case I'm just going to use the player, and it takes also a list of sprite lists. So in this case you have to give it a list, and just for example copy here the sprite list, and I'm just going to comment out this line and also remove the 2 so it will be just hit. And this will also work, as you can see. The only difference is that now we can pass multiple sprite lists here. So for example, if you have an enemy sprite list, you can do it like this. So in this case, the player will collide also with the ship list, also with the enemy list. And for example, if you have a bullet list like this, you can check the collision between one sprite object and multiple sprite lists. So that's how you can use the check for collision with lists function. Of course, I'm going to comment this out because I don't have any enemy list and I don't have any bullet lists.